Welcome to the On the Pen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
Friends, welcome to the On the Pen, the weekly dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Manjaro's Upbound, Compound, that pen. We talk about the news facing patients living with obesity each and every week so that you can have more competent and confident conversations with your doctor. We just empower you with information. That's what we do. It's what we've always done here. And if you enjoy that, or if that sounds important to you, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on the podcast, just hitting that little 5-star review and even leaving a little review about what you learned on the podcast, maybe, or how you may appreciate the podcast, goes such a long way in helping others to discover this information too. So that's your little sort of form of advocacy for today. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the Manjaro, and I've been making content about GLP-1s for nearly 3 years. And for most of those 3 years, I've been bringing you the news around this. There was no one out there in the whole world sharing obesity medicine news from the patient perspective. What we learned really fast is that there's a lot of news that flows out about obesity and obesity treatments, but it's not meant for us, the patients. It's meant for doctors. It's meant for investors. And so we take all that information and we try to bring it to you in a way that just empowers you. So I hope that you've been enjoying it along the way. We've got some really interesting stuff to get into this week. The first thing that I want to tell you is we're going to bring you an interview with a CEO of Fractal Health, Dr. Harith Rajagopalan. If you're not familiar with Fractal Health, they came out with some data this past week that shows that with a minimally invasive outpatient endoscopic procedure, you just may have hope of getting to your goal weight with a GLP-1 medication and maintaining it without the shot. I know that for many of you, the response is immediately going to be, Dave, I'm never going to give up my shot. If that's you, that's fine. But for those of you who maybe want to consider a life where you can get to the root of the disease and actually fix some broken biology, the Fractal Health stuff is really fascinating. And then I learned something new about a program, a gene modifying program. Now, this is where it gets into the sort of I don't know if I want to be first in line for that treatment, but they've got a couple of really fascinating procedures called the Revita program. And in the Revita program, they basically go in with, again, a minimally invasive endoscopic outpatient procedure, and they're able to program your body essentially to make more GLP-1 on demand and make more, this is the news for me, GIP as well. That's a new treatment with Rejuva 002. And so we're going to learn all about these different programs from Fractal, where they are in clinical trials, what the data means, and when we might see these things hit the market. And we're going to hear it directly from CEO Harith Rajagopalan of Fractal Health. If you want to look them up on the stock ticker, it's GUTS, GUTS. Check them out. Love what they're doing at Fractal Health. And of course, we're going to bring you an interview with the CEO when there's news like that to be had. So really excited about that. We got some data, some exclusive OTP data from the FDA this week on both the idea of hair loss when using a GLP-1 and the idea of breast milk and whether or not tirzepatide specifically passes through to the breast milk for nursing mothers. We're going to get into all of that. We're going to get into maybe even a little bit of what's going on with the most favored nations. In fact, why don't we lead off with that news today so I don't forget it, because the other ones are the real big ones that I wanted to get into. But before we do, I just want to shout out to our sponsor, Row. Row brings us the podcast each and every week. I'm so thankful for them. They have a program called the Row Body Program, where patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when coupling lifestyle modifications with appropriate access to GLP-1 medications when prescribed. Of course, learn about any medication before you take it. There are side effects, and all of that is listed on their website. Visit row.co/OTP. Within a couple clicks, you'll learn all about these medications, the potential side effects. But patients on the Row Body Program lose 15 to 20% in their body weight in a year. You can learn more about the Row Body Program at row.co/OTP, and let Row all over the social medias know that you appreciate them supporting the work that we do here at On the Pen. So let's get into this. One of the things that we learned this past week is that, first of all, the most favored nations deadline, which was yesterday, the 29th, came and went. And it's so pretty interesting. We've seen some news today that Pfizer is indeed going to lower some of the prices of their drugs. This means one of two things, because ultimately what we did not see a coming down of the price of Mounjaro and Zepbound. We did not see a coming down of the price of Wegovy and Ozempic. I think that means one of two things. Either that means that Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly are sort of taking the track that, hey, our direct-to-consumer, our D2C play with Lilly Direct and NovoCare, that was our lowering of the price. Now we're just bringing some of the other countries around the world up into alignment. Perhaps. The other thing is perhaps they're just waiting for some more pressure from the Trump administration to see, is there going to be any teeth or enforcement behind this? Because why would we lower our prices in the United States if there's going to be really no incentive to do so? And so it'll be something that we continue to watch here at On the Pen over the next couple of weeks. But what we did learn was the pharma, it's basically an organization, PHRMA. You can look them up. They announced that in 2026, they're going to be launching a consumer-facing website that is going to actually allow patients to look at all of the different direct-to-consumer prices that all the pharmaceutical companies are doing. Now, Lilly did it first with Lilly Direct, but you're seeing this with Novo. You're seeing it with Pfizer. They're coming up with these direct-to-consumer plays that go around the PBMs, cash pay for drugs. It's a way to lower the price by virtually just getting out the middleman, the PBMs, out of the process of drugs. Now, what I find interesting about this is we're still exorbitantly expensive. We're still looking at exorbitantly expensive medications. So while it takes the PBMs out, $500 a month is still too much when we're talking specifically about GLP-1s for most people to afford on the limited budget that they have, especially when you consider the cost of living these days. So that it's an exorbitantly high amount of money to pay. And so we'd like to see additional cost pressures on these companies to lower the price. But PHRMA Pharma, they're launching a consumer-facing website where you'll be able to go and see kind of everybody. It's like a marketplace of direct consumer drugs. Now, the Trump administration has also announced that they're going to put out their own Trumpy version of this. I don't know what they're going to call it, Trump RX or who knows. But it's going to be a government website that allows you to go and sort of do the same thing, see who all is doing these direct consumer plays. We'll have to see. With this most favored nation stuff, again, the deadline passed with no meaningful reductions in cost of the GLP-1s that we're talking about. That's maybe the negative news on pricing. We'll have to see how that evolves over the next couple of weeks, if at all. But another thing that's been in the news is this idea of tariffs and these 100% drug tariffs. I'm no economist. I don't dabble in that world at all. But what I will say is everything that I've looked into on these tariffs is that GLP-1s are relatively insulated, whether we're talking about Ozempic and Wegovy or Mounjaro and Zepbound. There is a couple of exclusions carved out for pharmaceutical companies in terms of whether they will have to pay these tariffs. And one of them had to do with investments in the United States in manufacturing. And this is something that was also a goal of the Trump administration to sort of repatriate or move back manufacturing to the United States, back to the shores of the United States. This is a positive thing. Again, I know that this gets into political stuff, but for me and where I'm sitting, and when I think about my family and access to the life-saving medication, for instance, that my wife needs, I feel a lot better knowing that those drugs are manufactured here at home, that we have our fingers on the pulse of the safety, the efficacy, of the availability of the medications that she needs to fight her chronic disease. And I feel the same way about my own. And if God forbid my children ever have them, I just feel better about them being at home. I think most people would probably agree with me if you live in the United States. If you're overseas, you probably feel the same way. Wouldn't you feel better if the drugs that you took were made around the corner and you knew that those were being tested and inspected and just that they were going to be available when you need them? So, that's personal opinion, personal side, but I just think it makes sense. And we've seen a massive amount of investment to the tune of $30+ billion from Eli Lilly. several $billion investments from Novo Nordisk in manufacturing, specifically their GLP-1s here in like North Carolina. And you saw their acquisition of Catalent. They acquired finish and fill factories in Indiana and other parts of the United States. So there is major investment from these companies that I think renders them pretty exempt or insulated from any tariffs. So when you look at the tariffs, and I've got a couple people who have reached out to me, and for some reason they're like, you're not going to talk about this. Why wouldn't I talk about this? It affects accessibility, but at the end of the day, I just don't think it will. I don't think this is going to actually, in terms of GLP-1, be super impactful at all, actually. So for those who are wondering about compounded medications, these have to do with branded medications coming from pharmaceutical companies. So when we talk about the cost of compounds and the potential of those to go up, I would pay more attention to the FDA green list and what's going on with that. And of course, we've talked about that. You can go back to previous podcasts from the previous weeks. We have different playlists. We've been talking about that for a long time, so I won't belabor all that today, especially given everything else that we have to get into. But, we're status quo right now. When we talk about accessibility, price of these medications right now, we're status quo. We hope that changes, and we'll be all over it if it does. And you know that we will. Hit that like, hit that bell, hit that sub. If you're just joining here, we're talking about obesity medicine news from the patient perspective. And along those lines, one of the things that I pride myself on being just super on top of is anytime anything changes with the FDA in terms of these medications. We were all over the vial news. I believe we were the first to break that news. I mean, anytime there's something that happens, we're going to get a new drug, a new presentation, all this stuff. We just try to stay on top of it because, again, our goal here at On the Pen is to help you to have more competent and confident conversations with your doctor so that ultimately you get better care. And how do we do that? We arm ourselves with information. And this is really fascinating information for breastfeeding mothers. Now, this is a really nuanced topic. It's not lost on me that there's a lot of nuance around breastfeeding. But if you are a woman or love a woman who is looking at the idea of being on a GLP-1 for whatever reason, it certainly is none of my business. But when it comes to the safety and efficacy, we did get some hard data on that this past couple of days. And I want to get into that a little bit and talk about what that means for patients and what you can do with the information that you get. So a lot of women have wondered during the lactation period, if they're breastfeeding, if they're going to pass along tirzepatide, Zepbound, Mounjaro to the baby. And what we learned from a package insert update. So it's the manual that comes with your Zepbound or your Mounjaro. All of that is heavily scrutinized by the FDA and involves, probably nearly a decade of research into a prescription drug in terms of the side effects, the dosing, the presentation, all of those things. And one of the things that they update these package inserts with is called post-marketing data. And we talk a lot about that actually here. Post-marketing data is just a way that the FDA sort of keeps tabs on potential new side effects that arise once a drug gets into the real world, because clinical trials are very controlled and they're short, and they don't always reflect how drugs are used in the real world. So when it comes to the idea of breastfeeding, until now, there was no clear answers about whether or not the drug gets passed along in the breast milk. Now, a couple of things that are important to understand about this. These studies, when they do these, they're almost always small studies if they do them at all. And if you think about it, it makes sense. So you have a new drug and you have a very small set of the population that happens to be using this drug, that also happens to be lactating, that also happens to be willing to participate in a study. So you got a lot of things working against it. Not only that, what you're trying to do is tell if a drug passes through to the breast milk and could potentially harm a baby. And so ultimately what you have here is very small studies. But fortunately, with this specific topic, what they're trying to gauge is whether the molecule of the drug itself is large enough to avoid passing through the breast tissue and into the breast milk and onto the baby. It's simply a matter of, will it fit through or will it not fit through? And so the fortunate thing with tirzepatide for a lot of doctors out there that I've heard speak on this topic is that they're known to be large. Peptides in general are typically larger molecules that have a harder time passing through to breast milk. And here's what we got with the FDA label update. I want to read exactly from the label. And we covered this yesterday at obesity.news. We linked to the FDA label itself so you can read it for yourself if you'd like. If you're not signed up for email alerts there, what are you doing with your life? I mean, you could have had this in your email inbox yesterday morning. But here's the quote. Following subcutaneous administration of a single 5 milligram dose to 11 healthy lactating adult females, the concentration of tirzepatide in breast milk was found to be undetectable in 164 of 171 samples. The cumulative amount detected in the remaining 7 samples over 28 days was equivalent to less than 0.02% of the maternal dose. The last measurable concentrations occurred 5 days post-dose. So essentially what they did is they took 11 healthy lactating women, and these women were on a 5 milligram dose of tirzepatide. Again, what they're trying to figure out is whether or not the drug passes through to the breast milk in a meaningful way, right? That's why you might go, why didn't they test the 15? Well, if it was small enough to pass through, then you're giving an infant, potentially high doses of this. So they're very cautious with this for obvious reasons. And it's important to know that many, many drugs that are on the market do have this same package insert for lactating mothers. And they're typically all based on these very, very small studies like this at typically low doses. So drugs like metformin and Zoloft and Paxil, they all have these breastfeeding sections in the package inserts, and sometimes it's fewer than a dozen moms, and usually just these low doses, right? So these mothers, they took samples, 171 samples, and out of 171, 164 had zero trace of the drug at all. And in the remaining 7 samples, the amount of the drug was less than 0.02. Again, just trying to see if the molecule made it through, less than 0.02% of the maternal dose. And so essentially, patients or people who love patients that are breastfeeding or would like to consider using treatment at some point during lactation. Obviously, this is a conversation between you and your doctor, right? But we're always just trying to empower you with information. So you can go to obesity.news and get the actual letters from the FDA, and these will be included in the package inserts in future deliveries of your medication. But here's what you can do with this information, because this doesn't ultimately mean that it is 100% safe or that we know all the concerns about, using Zepbound during breastfeeding and lactation. We don't. It just simply shows that the likelihood of the drug passing through to breast milk is very, 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 very low, right? And again, using this FDA sort of metric that they've used for a long time with drugs. So here's what you can do with this, right? You can bring this to your doctor. Bring it to your doctor, your OB, your pediatrician. Share the FDA label update specifically verbatim so that the two of you can have an informed discussion about it. Because far be it from me as a podcaster to tell you what to do, or anyone on the internet for that matter. But what you can do is arm yourself with information. Know the risk is likely low. If you're going off of previous drugs where they've studied this and looked at this in a very similar way, know that most of the time tirzepatide will likely not show up in breast milk. Your weight and your health and your diabetes are important to manage too. So treating those chronic diseases is not just about you. It's also about how you can show up and care for and love your baby. And these are all very personal decisions. And all we're trying to do is arm you with the information. So on the obesity.news, you can go there. There are links to this update. And I hope that it just helps women to feel more empowered to make those decisions with their doctors. Before this, we didn't really have any information. This study dropped last week, but actually the FDA update was approved this week. And that's the news that we're reporting. Now, in other news on the updates to the labeling of both Zepbound and Mounjaro, One of the things that I want everyone to be aware of is this update where in post-marketing data, they have added alopecia as a potential side effect. Now, hair loss in general has always been on the package insert for Mounjaro and Zepbound based upon stuff that they saw in clinical trials. This was isolated to subsets of people taking the medication and oftentimes was most often reported with women. Now, the significance of adding alopecia specifically is it's a different, broader term for hair loss. So when we talk about hair loss, there's a lot, I'm obviously no expert in this, but there's different types of hair loss. And most of the hair loss that I've heard doctors speak on this topic in terms of GLP-1 use is this hair specific kind of hair loss called teleflogen effluvium, teleflora effluvium. Let me actually look this up so I don't botch it completely. But a specific kind of hair loss that is really a body's response, like a shock response, So think about adding a new drug. Think about a crash diet, a super stressful event, or rapid weight loss. This is typically what hair loss has been attributed to with these medications. So telogen effluvium is the medical term. Sorry, again, not a hair loss expert, although I do have a bit of lived experience on the matter. Not male pattern baldness. The medical term is telogen effluvium, and we typically see this also after bariatric surgery, childbirth. I mean, women tend to experience this a lot in our community, and so I'm sort of relying on anecdotal reports from all of you. But the significance of the FDA sort of adding this in the post-marketing data is saying, this is a thing that's observed in the real world. And I think that oftentimes women are told it's just because you're losing weight rapidly. And I think that a lot of women would kick back and say, well, I was losing a very modest amount of weight, half a pound a week, a very safe or healthy amount of weight, according to my doctor. Or perhaps I was even microdosing the medication and I still lost a significant amount of hair. Now, the good news for anyone who's facing this is I've yet to hear of anybody to go bald from these medications. It seems to be a pretty consistent thinning of the hair, although it's experienced in different levels of severity within our community. But it typically comes out and levels out with the weight sort of, hitting a stable zone. So once your weight stabilizes, typically the hair comes back, it gets thicker, fuller again. But many women who have definitely come into my comments and to my inbox and said, I'm on a small dose, I'm on a micro dose, and I'm still losing hair. This is just, I think, a validation by the FDA that this is something that is definitely observed in the real world with these medications. And calling it out as alopecia specifically, rather than just hair loss associated with weight, I think is noteworthy. And I think just a validation, right? And so that's why I wanted to bring this to you. It's not that this idea of hair loss is new with GLP-1 medications or weight loss or stress or new medications. It's just that I think that a lot of women probably feel I say women specifically because most of the guys that I know are dealing with hair loss is typically male pattern baldness. But the women in our community, I think, generally tend to express that they feel gaslit on this matter a little bit. And I don't want to minimize it because a woman and hair loss is like a very deeply personal thing. And I know many women deal with it. And I just want to approach it with the an honest look at, what are we actually hearing here and what's the significance? So a lot of women will say, what can you do? And I don't have a lot of great advice, but I will say that many of the doctors who've been engaging in this content online that I follow have said that perhaps talking to your doctor about minoxidil, which is typically, like Rogaine, right? Lower dose minoxidil can help, even though it does kind of sometimes whether significantly or insignificantly contributes to weight gain. Typically, I think it's associated with more water weight than anything, but talk to your doctor about that. And obviously making sure that you're prioritizing protein in your diet and iron, zinc, vitamins, multivitamins, all of those things can be helpful. If you think about it this way, especially with the idea of a stress response in your body, when you remove a bunch of nutrients from your body and you're consuming fewer calories, your body is trying to conserve energy for the most important critical functions of your body: your heart beating, your breathing, your blood sugar control, your brain, all of these things that have to work, and they need energy to work. And so what does your body do? Well, it sort of tends to put the hair follicles in sort of like a sleep mode, because it goes, "Oh, what are the things that we can get rid of to conserve energy right now?" And that's why ultimately, when the weight level's out and you're getting good nutrition for the weight that you're at and you're not in this huge deficit, the body tends to like release itself from this stress mode, right? Again, I'm just regurgitating what other doctors have said. Look this up for yourself. I'm not a medical professional. I'm a podcaster. But this is what I wanted to bring to you, because I know this is just a huge topic within the community. We did an article here at obesity.news about this too. It also links to an article we did last fall about this topic, where we linked to some vitamins that we talked to some doctors about. It's like, hey, what would be good things to recommend to women who are dealing with this? And so it's linked to another article at onthepen.com. We've got some resources for you, I guess, is the point that I'm trying to get at here. And I hope that you'll check them out if you're somebody who's been dealing with that, because I know this is a big deal for a lot of women out there. Want to take a moment and thank our sponsors, Shape'a. The Shape'a scale. If you don't know this, I'm in the blue right now, which is a really good place to be. It's the numberless scale, and it has kept me engaged with my health in a very meaningful way. I'm down to 270 pounds today, right? And that is 49 pounds down from my highest weight. And it is the lowest that I have weighed in 8 or 9 years. I continue to lose weight, and I'm doing it because when I have those daily fluctuations, it's not keeping me from getting on the scale. When I'm engaged with the scale, I'm engaged with my health. And when the scale starts to betray me, I don't step on it. And when I'm not stepping on it, I'm less engaged with the decisions I'm making on a day-to-day basis about what I put into my body, because I am a mental case, is what it comes down to. When I'm just being real honest, when it comes to the scale, I'm screwed up, and the Shape'a scale is helping to unwire that for me by giving me a rolling average of my progress, right? It's helping me to zoom out, and instead of looking at day-to-day fluctuations, I'm looking at a 7-day rolling average of what my body's doing in terms of water weight, in terms of muscle mass, in terms of the scale. But it's giving me a color zone, and I want to aim for either green for maintaining, teal for light weight loss, or blue for substantial weight loss. And I've been fluctuating between the teal and the blue for a couple of weeks. And so I'm thankful for the Shape'a scale, because it is helping me to stay engaged with my health. And I really do believe it's contributing to more weight loss after 3 years of basically being at the same weight, 2.5 years of being at the same weight, or moving up and then slowly coming back down. So I want to thank our friends at Shape'a. If you are interested in this, if you've got a screwed up relationship with the scale like me, but you understand the importance of being engaged with your health in that way, go to myshape'a.com/OTP. If you want to buy the scale, code OTP30 is going to save you 30% on this scale. Like, it's a great deal they're offering to our community. They understand the importance of this for many people like myself. And I hope that you'll check it out and give them some love in the comments for supporting the work that we do here at On the Pen. Now, this is the part of the show where I have been so excited to bring you an interview with Dr. Harith Rajagopalan with Fractal Health, CEO of Fractal Health. An excellent conversation about what they're doing. If you get excited about the future of obesity medicine, perhaps the future of getting to root cause disease, you're going to want to stay tuned for this interview. It's the third one we've done with Dr. Rajagopalan. Without further ado, welcome him into the podcast this week. Super excited to bring you this interview this week. We are, I believe this is our third time sitting down with Mr. Harith Rajagopalan. Dr. Rajagopalan is a co-founder of Fractal Health. Now, if you haven't caught the previous interviews, you have got to go back and check these out. These are some minimally invasive procedures that they're working on at Fractal Health that have the potential to absolutely change the game when it comes to obesity medicine. I like to think of it as this kind of hybrid world between pharmaceutical therapies and the more invasive metabolic surgeries. It's something that lives sort of right in between there, and I think could be a super attractive option for people in the future who are living with the chronic disease of obesity and type 2 diabetes. We got some really interesting data this past week in one of their studies, the Revita program, which I'll let Dr. Rajagopalan set that all up, and let's welcome him in for the third time. Dr. Harith Rajagopalan. Harith, welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Such a pleasure to be here.
I'm so thankful that you're back here and willing to share. I think that Fractal is starting to develop to generate some real buzz, not only with the investor community. Obviously, they're starting to take major note of what you're doing there, but in the patient community. And that's what gets me excited, Harith, because I believe both your Revita and Rejuva programs offer some potentially amazing hope to people living with these diseases. Harith, tell us about the news that we got this past week on the Revita program.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. So we're very excited because we've been running our studies of Revita now in this really huge, new, important area in obesity, which is what do you do for people who need to or want to stop taking a GLP-1 for their weight, but are afraid of or trying to avoid the regain that inevitably happens when you stop these medicines. So we've been working on developing a therapeutic approach called Revita that targets the hunger center of your gut in a region of the gut called the duodenum with a minimally invasive outpatient endoscopic procedure. And what we reported on Friday are interim results from our first randomized sham-controlled double-blind study testing whether Revita versus a sham can prevent weight regain in people who've already lost weight on tirzepatide. So the way that we designed the study is we took individuals who had obesity but were not on a GLP-1. We gave them all tirzepatide, which is the same thing as Zepbound or Mounjaro, and got them to lose 15% of their body weight on the tirzepatide, and then took the tirzepatide away and then randomizing them to either Revita or a sham, and then asked what happens 3 months later. So these are results in 3 months from 45 patients, about 29 randomized to Revita, 16 randomized to sham. And what we reported are incredible results, clear evidence that Revita can prevent weight regain after tirzepatide. In fact, patients in the Revita arm lost an incremental 2.5% of their body weight, whereas patients in the sham arm regained 10% of their total body weight, which means that there's this big difference even within 3 months in terms of where weight is for people who underwent Revita versus people who underwent the sham procedure. Very exciting day for Fractal.
Absolutely. So essentially, if I got this right, patients were on on tirzepatide until they reached 15% of their goal to 15% weight loss, and then they were either given what you call a sham procedure, which basically would be placebo, or they were given the Revita program. And the folks on Revita over the following 3 months, the medication was taken away, but the folks that got the Revita procedure lost an additional 2.5% of their body weight over 3 months, where the cohort that lost the medicine and got the placebo procedure gained 10% in just 3 months.
That's right. And as you know, this problem of what happens when you stop a GLP-1 affects millions of people a year. We decided to test Revita in maybe one of the hardest places in which you could possibly test it, is you get people to lose what turns out to be about 40 pounds of their weight from roughly 220 pounds down to 180 pounds, and then take the tirzepatide away from them. What you're doing is you're creating an incredibly hungry group of people because their brain is trying to get them back up to 220 pounds. And in that context, Revita was able to show clear evidence that it is helping people keep the weight off. And I think what's very exciting about it is that it gives hope to the idea that you may not necessarily need to be on a medicine in order to keep your weight lower for the rest of your life. At the end of the day, I think that changing the body's physiologic functioning so that it can lead a life at a lower, healthier weight is such a compelling thing to strive for. And what we're really excited about is that this may be an indication that we're on our way to offering something just like that.
Very interesting. So a couple of questions that jump out to me right away, and then I want to get to a few questions from community members. The study involved 45 patients, as you said, right? That's a typical size? Like most people may look at that and say that's a pretty small number, right? But that's typical for these type of procedures at this phase of a clinical trial, correct?
Well, you might call it the equivalent of like a phase 2 type of a study. It's a proof of concept that Revita can work in this way.
Okay.
I add that we have a pivotal study underway in the United States at the same centers following the same protocol in 315 patients. That is a single pivotal study that would be needed in order to file for approval with the FDA. We have alignment with FDA on that study. That study is actually already fully enrolled. I'm been just incredibly amazed by how rapidly our weight maintenance studies have enrolled, because without spending a dime on marketing for this study, we just heard through word of mouth, patients wanted to be able to enroll in the trial. And
cool.
It's really gratifying to know that the full pivotal is fully enrolled and is well on its way. And it looks a lot like the 45 patient study that we just reported.
Very cool. And how far along in that is that study?
So everyone has already been started on tirzepatide. A large fraction of them have actually already had the tirzepatide discontinued and have been randomized to either Revita or the placebo or sham procedure. We anticipate completing all of those randomizations by early in 2026.
Okay.
And around this time next year, we expect reporting the top line data from that pivotal study.
So the
But
top
along
line,
the way, we'll have a lot of more data from this and other studies in weight maintenance. So we'll have a steady stream of news about how Revita is working for longer and longer periods of time leading up to that pivotal study.
so this is more of what you would classify as a phase 2 study that we're talking about today, and this is sort of a mid-stage update. In other words, you've got a few months left to go on this specific study, correct?
Yeah, we'll report 6-month data on these 45 patients early in the first quarter of 2026, around the same time that we complete randomizing the full pivotal study. And so we'll see what 6-month data look like from these 45 early next year, and then we'll see what 6-month data look like for the full 315 patient pivotal study in the second half of next year.
Very cool. Now there are kind of shifting subject or topics a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who take these medications, especially tirzepatide, who say, you know, the number one thing that I love about tirzepatide that I never want to give up. And you know, we could talk all day about why the reasons people have to go off. I mean, oftentimes it's not even the patient's choice.
Right.
It is an insurance decision, a job change. Usually it centers around accessibility in one way or the other. One of the things that they get very concerned about losing is this way that tirzepatide has of controlling what people refer to as food noise.
Right.
Do you anticipate that, and I realize it's sort of a broad question, but do you anticipate that the Revita program has the ability to through the restoration of endogenous hormones to help with food noise, this idea of food noise?
What we've seen from our clinical experience with Revita, mostly in type 2 diabetes, is that people have much less food noise after the Revita procedure than they did before. There's something about targeting and potentially correcting a root cause of obesity in the gut that may be taking people's food noise away. And we're going to be doing controlled questionnaires for patients in the pivotal study around this food noise question that will answer it. Anecdotally, we are hearing that a lot of patients who undergo Revita just don't feel that food noise anymore. And one of the points that you made, which is a lot of people really like tirzepatide, but they don't want to necessarily stop it, but they feel like they have to for one reason or another, is something we're hearing all of the time. And one of the fundamental challenges associated with these drugs is it takes a long time to get to your target weight to titrate it up and then to get it there. It's like hard work and a lot of time. And it can be feeling very fragile for patients, because if you want to change jobs and you may not necessarily have access to the same drug again, then once that drug is taken away from you, you're going to feel food noise within 2 to 3 weeks, and the weight regain is almost inevitable. And so solving that problem for people who need to or want to stop tirzepatide or any other GLP-1 drug for whatever reason feels to us like the single most important challenge in obesity today. And that's why we're so excited about the data that we presented on Friday, because it shows that for people who just can't stay on a GLP-1 for whatever reason, you don't have to worry potentially about that food noise and weight regain and then losing all of that hard-won weight loss or metabolic benefit that you worked so hard for over those periods of months and years.
So when we talk about targeting the duodenum, essentially what this procedure does in practice, as you've explained it on previous interviews, is this is a resurfacing of the lining, a very minimally invasive endoscopic procedure that allows your body to resurface and regenerate those cells. Can you tell us a little bit about what those cells are responsible for and why this procedure may ultimately have a similar effect on things like hunger and food noise?
Sure. One thing I'll just say very clearly is like the gut is not just a dumb tube. The gut is the single largest endocrine organ in the body and the second largest nervous system outside of the brain. And so there are hormone producing cells and nerves sitting in your gut, and they're communicating with the rest of the body all of the time. One of the things that the gut is communicating is how much food is being eaten, when it's being eaten, and what types of food are being eaten. It helps the brain and the rest of the body know how to control blood sugar and hunger throughout the day. And the duodenum, which is the region of the gut that we're targeting, is the very first part of the intestine, comes right after the stomach. It's a first place where sugar and fat and protein are absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream. And so there are nerve fibers right there in that wall of the duodenum that are communicating directly to the brain so that the brain can know whether you should be feeling hungry or not. And people who consume high fat, high sugar diets over the course of their lives develop changes to the lining of the gut that make that sensing not work well anymore. So you never really get the sense of fullness and satiety that you're supposed to feel after a meal. And by resurfacing that lining and allowing the body to regenerate a healthy new lining, what we think is happening is you're essentially resetting those abnormal signals back towards allowing a meal to make you feel full again. And that's not working well in people with obesity. We think that's fixable by targeting the gut as we're doing.
So you call out a couple culprits: fat, sugar. Let's call it maybe the standard American diet that you think is probably responsible for the, I don't know how to couch it exactly, but the degradation of the sensitivity of these cells.
Right.
So for patients who are thinking about this, I'm sure one of the first questions that pops up, and we've seen this from many people across the comments of our various videos, is this a procedure that you would imagine would have to be done more than one time? And if so, how frequently?
Here's what I think. I think that most people know that when they have developed obesity or diabetes, that they should be eating diets that are healthier, that are less full of ultra-processed food, less fatty, less sugary than what they were having before. The problem is you're fighting against a brain that is trying to make you crave those things much more so than people who don't have obesity or diabetes. So my view is shaped by having family members with type 2 diabetes, where I've seen like the craving for high fat, high sugar foods is incredibly high in people with the disease. It's part of the disease itself, right? And if we can fix the craving for and the food noise that is a consequence of it, then people can actually follow a diet much more easily. And the reason I say that is because if we can then fix what is wrong in the gut, and if people then can lead a healthy diet and lifestyle, as many want to do, then this should be something that can last for a very, very long period of time. And if for whatever reason that gut dysfunction returns, we do believe this is a procedure that can be repeated at some point in the future. And what's nice about Revita is that it's really designed to be a very straightforward procedure for a person to go through. The only thing that you got to do is not eat anything after dinner the night before the procedure. You've spent about an hour in the endoscopy lab with wherever you might get a colonoscopy or upper endoscopy for other reasons. And then there's essentially no downtime. You go to the recovery room, you recover, you go home, and then you're back to your daily life immediately thereafter. And so what we're asking people to consider is whether you would rather have an hour in endoscopy lab under propofol or similar anesthesia for a fairly straightforward procedure that our data show has a pretty compelling tolerability profile, and offer yourself an opportunity to fundamentally correct something that's wrong in your body that's driving the disease in the first place. I think that's going to be pretty attractive to a lot of people. Now, some people may say, you know what, I'm good taking tirzepatide for the rest of my life. I'm 40 years old. I've benefited from it for the past year. I'm happy to be taking this for the next 30, 40 years of my life. That's fine. And if that's the case, great. But other people might say, you know what, I'd prefer a chance at a metabolic reset. I'd prefer an opportunity to fix what's wrong in my body that's driving the disease in the first place. That's the motivation for why we're trying to work on this. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people who suffer from metabolic disease in this country. But what that means is the people should have multiple choices. You know, some people want to stay on drugs forever. By all means, more power to you. These drugs are great. If not, you can try Revita. One interesting thing about the data that we're seeing is that it makes us think about how Revita might be useful, not just for people who want to stop taking a GLP-1, but potentially considering it as primary therapy, fixing what's going wrong, and then building the medicines on top of Revita rather than the other way around. And in that way, you know, why not think about Revita like you might think about fixing your coronary arteries if you've had a heart attack, which is not only do you want to stent that vessel open, but also you want to take medicines to prevent you from having another heart attack. So the way to think about obesity or diabetes through that lens would be fix what's wrong in the gut that's causing the obesity and the diabetes, and then put the medicines on top to prevent the disease from coming back. And in that way, you could think about Revita as a potential backbone therapy for metabolic disease, rather than what you do when you just want to stop taking the GLP-1. Either way, I think could have incredible value for patients.
Yeah, I agree. It sort of answered the next question I had in terms of, can somebody take this alongside a GLP-1, or as you said, maybe even before they consider a GLP-1. So if this achieves an FDA approval, you don't anticipate that this will be simply a GLP-1 maintenance procedure. This would be something that would be available to somebody who maybe isn't even considering a GLP-1?
Well, the current clinical study that we are running is in the post-GLP-1 weight maintenance category, because that is a very high unmet need, very hard to treat patient population, where diet and lifestyle are not enough to help people keep the weight off, which has been well established in the science. So what we're offering with the REMAIN pivotal study that we're currently running is a potential to offer an off-ramp from a GLP-1. However, if it works in that context, which is in some sense the hardest to treat patient population, then why would you not consider using it frontline or in combination with drugs? And in that way, really turn it into a potential backbone therapy where you can choose it anywhere along the journey, like a GLP-1 is considered today.
So I know that you can't hypothesize in terms of how payers will view the procedure. Obviously, you're hopeful that they would see the value in the potential of somebody receiving this as a treatment over a GLP-1 or receiving the treatment to maintain the progress that they've achieved with the GLP-1. I'm looking at, maybe some of the other studies that we've seen for GLP-1s. Do you see that as potentially a blueprint to get better payer coverage in terms of maybe what the Revita procedure may do for people's lipids or cardiovascular outcomes or sleep apnea or any of the? Is that on your radar at all?
We're looking at all of that in our pivotal trial itself. So that'll give us some clues as to the potential directions that this could go. I think it's pretty clear that losing 5% or 10% of your body weight is good for you, clinically meaningful weight loss. And conversely, maintaining that amount of weight loss versus stopping the drug and then losing all of that weight loss or regaining all of that weight, is also likely to be good for you, just based on what we know about obesity and its link to all of these diseases in the first place. I think the payer dynamics are complicated, but these GLP-1s are not inexpensive for payers. And right now, when someone's on it, they're looking at potential need for coverage for the rest of that person's life, which is a lot of money to be spent on maintaining that pharmacology. It's not cheap. And so there's benefits from a clinical and medical standpoint, like what you're talking about from Revita, but there's also potential benefit just in offsetting the cost of the GLP-1 drugs themselves. And from a payer, in our conversations with payers, one frustration and challenge that they face is that if someone pays for a year's worth of a GLP-1 and then loses a bunch of weight, but then stops taking the medicine and then regains all of that weight right back, there wasn't much value in the money spent on the GLP-1 in the first place. If those results are not maintained, then why lose the weight just to gain it all back again? And so there may be a very strong argument here that's a very payer-friendly argument about how you can help people lead a clinically, medically healthier life, but also not have the futility of stopping a GLP-1 drug that has really no long-term benefit. And when you then compare what you're seeing in the phase 3 studies with these medicines versus what Cleveland Clinic and others are reporting in actual real-world practice, there's a big gap between how the drugs do in the New England Journal and how they do in the practice at Cleveland Clinic. And it's not the quality of the physicians or the interest of the patients. It's just the fact that, if you start and stop the drug, it's not going to work. So what are we paying for, really, becomes a fundamental question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know there's always the challenge with payers to view their patients beyond the 1 or 2 years that they have them too. And so I think that's always something that's ever before a patient living with obesity is how do we get these payers to zoom out and the more progressive payers perhaps to see the benefit that this could have long term to all payers, even if it doesn't benefit them immediately to get a patient to a healthy BMI. I want to shift topics a little bit, Harith, if you got a few more minutes, because one of the pieces of feedback that I got from someone here in the comments of one of the videos that we did was the Revita program doesn't do much for this particular person, as they had a weight loss surgery where the duodenum doesn't come into play anymore. Right. Okay. So they said, this does nothing for me. What about me? So let's talk to that patient, because you have another program called the Rejuva program. And yeah. I find this one particularly fascinating. Can you give us a brief flyover of what the Rejuva program is, and then where you're at in the clinical testing for that program?
Sure. So we've been talking about GLP-1 drugs for the last 30 minutes, right? And so the thing about GLP-1 drugs is you either inject yourself or you swallow a pill that makes your whole body get this chemical that is not a natural GLP-1 hormone in your body, but it mimics the natural GLP-1 hormone in order to be able to improve your blood sugar and lower your body weight. But in order to do so, the way that these drugs work is they get to very, very high levels in your bloodstream so that they can touch every part of your body equally. And the challenge that creates is that as much of the the benefit that they have on blood sugar and on body weight, they also can be associated with tolerability challenges, because those same chemicals also bind to receptors in the brain that are responsible for nausea and vomiting. And so you have medicines that are very effective, but they are associated with nausea and vomiting, and they require really high levels in the bloodstream. And as we've been talking about for the past 30 minutes, when you stop taking them, it's almost like you go through withdrawal, because now your brain is trying to get you back up to that very high weight or blood sugar you were at before, and you're going to feel food noise and incredible hunger that's going to drive you back there quickly. What if there were a way to offer endogenous, natural GLP-1 on demand, but just at higher levels than what your body is actually producing them? And what if that could be made where your body needs it most, in your gut, and then released into the bloodstream only when the body really needed it? That's what we're working on with our Rejuva program. We call it a smart GLP-1, and it has the potential to be a once in a lifetime treatment that can match or exceed what you might get with GLP-1 drugs from an effect standpoint, but only need to be done once, and will not need, based on our preclinical work, nearly as much circulating amount of hormone as the drugs require, which means that it's likely to be much, much better tolerated. What we think is this is the next evolution of how you make GLP-1s work for people, which is as potent or more potent than the existing best-in-class medicines, very long-lasting, potentially once in a lifetime, still giving you the GLP-1 effects, but with much lower levels that are much less likely to cause tolerability issues. That's what the Rejuva program is. And the way that we do that is by essentially engineering a genetic medicine that teaches the pancreas to make the GLP-1 hormone whenever it's making insulin. That is finished with its preclinical testing for Rejuva 001, our first candidate, and is getting ready to enter the clinic. And we are filing with regulators as we speak. We anticipate treating our first patients with type 2 diabetes with this approach next year, and then reporting first human data next year. And Dave, I know you have type 2 diabetes, and so you know that the reason that your blood sugar is high is in part because the cells that make insulin in your body are not working that well anymore. And that GLP-1 as a hormone can reverse those things, but you're not making enough GLP-1 in order for it to be protected against the type 2 diabetes. So what we're going to do is sort of envision allowing your pancreas to make even more GLP-1 so that those beta cells can stay healthy and can still make insulin when needed, but do so in a manner that allows the pancreas to not lose its ability to make insulin, so your body can regulate blood sugar on its own again normally. And the ideal sort of product profile here would be, wouldn't several years of diabetes remission be great without the need for ongoing medical therapy? That's what we're going for with Rejuva.
Very interesting. So a gene therapy, correct?
That's right.
That is basically programming your body, your pancreas specifically, to make more endogenous GLP-1. Ultimately, it's your body's way of making more of what it naturally makes in response to nutrient intake. So it's, I think, and you explained this very well last time as well that you came on the podcast, in terms of it's important to understand that this helps your body to make more GLP-1 when you eat in response to nutrient intake, just like your normal GLP-1 production. I think one of the things that I think, because again, when we talk about this stuff, you and I, we're speaking to a network of 150,000 people. All of them are on GLP-1s, and very few of them ever want to lose access to a GLP-1s.
Right.
But the thought of maybe a one and done procedure that helps them is very, compelling. I think one of the more compelling pieces of this is, could over time this specific type of technology be used to target other hormones that are involved in obesity, satiety, insulin production, etc. But also, we really do not have long-term data on the action of GIP medication specifically. Tirzepatide has only been around for a few years.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the endogenous version of these hormones that we make, there's a very short half-life in your body of this. In other words, you're not going to have this effective GLP-1 in your bloodstream for days on end after eating a meal. It's going to, the GLP-1 once secreted will act as your normal endogenous. So you'll have it, you'll get the satiety signaling, it'll go away. Now with Ozempic, semaglutide, other GLP-1 analogs, these hormones have been wrapped in like a fatty acid to
keep them around
in your body for much longer. And so they're allowed to penetrate the areas of your body, as you said, for much longer and at much higher orders of magnitude than your endogenous GLP-1. And so that has effects that has potential effects or potential side effects that in your endogenous GLP-1 may not. And so I think about that often in terms of GIP because it's a newer medication. And I just am curious how that will all play out in the real world, because in one sense, you have the benefit of these GLP-1 analogs. It is a benefit to people from a satiety standpoint that they are lasting and sticking around in the body. You just don't get that hunger cue the same way that you once did. I am curious how much you have to increase endogenous GLP-1 to get a similar weight loss outcome, since it will spike but then go away, right?
It's a fascinating question, and I'm going to just sort of answer it in a slightly different way. Like, the pharmaceutical manufacturers have a desire to develop a drug that has a particular compelling profile, which is like no more than once a day or no more than once a week or even once a month. And so what they have to do is they have to figure out, how am I going to engineer this chemical entity so that it will enter your body and then work for a length of time that is commercially viable, but where you're going to need more and more and more of it over time, because that is the business model of the manufacturer, to continue to sell this drug for the patent life of the medicine. Right? Now, that is the business model for that whole entire industry. And that has driven like incredible promise and success with the GLP-1 drugs as we have them now, where there's been innovation over the last 20 years that's gotten to a point where we have tirzepatide and some of the newer agents that are coming that are all addressing this. But let's also bear in mind that I think that there's a significant fraction of people for whom the job to be done is to feel well enough without medicine so that you don't feel like you are diseased in the first place, right? And that is not possible if you need to take this medicine for the rest of your life in order for it to work. So what if we instead say, well, the job to be done for some patients is actually to just try to fix what is going wrong in the body so that the body can control blood sugar and body weight on its own without the need for ongoing medicines. That's where our approaches with both Revita and Rejuva come in. That's the tie that binds our strategy, which is to defend the human body from the need for ongoing pharmacological therapy because it's a healthier body to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so if the pancreas can be engineered to make GLP-1 on demand, our data from preclinical models and diabetes models, obesity models, and large animals and small animals is that this could have a profound impact on that body's ability to control blood sugar and body weight within a normal range on its own indefinitely. That's pretty darn compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized sort of the lead up to the question, I was kind of all over the place, but I guess what I was getting at is I like the idea of of this being our natural GLP-1, being able to increase the volume of our natural GLP-1, which degrades at the same clip as our natural GLP-1 because we don't have that real long-term data. And I realize you're not looking at GIP here, but potentially I assume that Fractal is deep in the throes of looking at what other nutrient stimulated hormones could potentially be targeted in the future. And I look forward to hearing, about those. And I don't know if you have
I'll
anything
just
to
tease
share
you
on
on one thing is we nominated a second candidate in our Rejuva platform we call Rejuva 002 last year. And that is a GIP GLP-1 combination produced within the pancreas itself, both natural GIP and natural GLP-1. And we haven't yet disclosed any of our preclinical data publicly, but we are really thrilled with how that looks.
How far off roughly are we from seeing some preclinical data on that?
Maybe not that far off.
Okay.
We're going to be presenting it at a scientific congress in the not too distant future, hopefully. And when we do, we'd love to come and talk to you about that and how it matches up against Rejuva 001. But Rejuva 001 is gearing up for the clinic as we speak. And I think, our goal is in 26 to be able to dose our first patients, to demonstrate safety and feasibility, to report some early data with 001. And how that plays is going to then shape how 002 gets developed.
Sure. Whatever scientific congress that gets presented at, I would love to have a little heads up on that. I'd love to be there because these what you're doing at Fractal, and I kind of teed this up in my introduction here. I love that you're sort of merging these two worlds of these. Obviously, we've seen a lot of data recently that shows that the durability and the efficacy of the best in metabolic and weight loss surgery is still quite a bit ahead of what we can get out of these pharmacotherapies. And I think that's ever changing, but the medication and coverage for the medication just continues. We can have all the pharmacological advancements that the human mind or AI can contrive. If people can't get access to them, they mean very little. But if you can sort of bridge this world of the best of what pharmacotherapy offers and the best of what, potentially these minimally invasive procedures can do, I really get excited for the future of obesity medicine and what you're doing. I think it's so unique. And so that's super interesting to hear that you're already looking that direction. I'm not surprised, but I'm excited about that. So we've got data coming in 2026 is going to be a big year for Fractal Health, right? Huge year. We're going to get a lot more data on this. And I hope that you'll come back and share some of that with us as it comes along. Now, one of the questions that I think everybody has on their minds in terms of everything we've talked about today, like if you had to put somewhat of a at least a year date on it, what year might a patient be able to actually go and receive a Revita procedure and then a Rejuva procedure?
Okay, well, Revita procedure, since we have already stated publicly that we hope to get pivotal data next year and to file with the FDA by the end of next year, then you could imagine that the approval, if the data look good, which we're hoping it will, is going to be several quarters thereafter. Okay. So we're looking at, we haven't yet publicly given a date because that's in the hands of the FDA, but typically these things take 9 to 12 months in their review cycle. And so that's been the historical norm. And on the Rejuva side, clinical studies will be enrolling patients in 2026. And we'll see how the first in human goes. But typically you do like pilot studies and then you do pivotal studies. And so there is some work to be done there before it's commercially available. But within a clinical setting, it'll hopefully be available next year.
Amazing. Well, Harith, I really appreciate you joining on the pin this week and giving us this update. I'm really looking forward to next year. I think we'll have some very exciting conversations. Congratulations on this positive data that you all received this past week. And I really look forward to talking to you about this in the future. And this just becoming a reality to people, for people and patients struggling with the diseases of type 2 diabetes and obesity. Anything else you'd like to add before we go?
Well, we're just a team, a small group of people here based in Burlington, Massachusetts, and all of us are here because we believe in the mission of trying to do things that are going to restore the health of people who are living with obesity and type 2 diabetes. Many of us are either people suffering from the disease ourselves or have family members who are suffering. And so what motivates all of us when we get up every morning and when we go to bed each night to do what we're trying to do is because we think that everyone deserves a chance at leading a healthy life that is free of disease. And that is something that we believe that we are leaders in trying to advance, both scientifically, but also then from a product and then eventually commercially. And so that mission of helping people lead healthier lives is something that drives all of us. And I appreciate, Dave, how you, as both a patient, but also as an advocate and as somebody who's educating people on this, can sort of understand it from all of those different perspectives. And the opportunity to come and share our updates with you means a lot to me. So I want to thank you and your listeners as well.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and we always appreciate hearing from you. Always appreciate hearing about the future of obesity medicine and the hope that it provides, because folks like you are so passionate about what you do, and we just appreciate that alignment there too, because everything we do here is just designed to help people have better conversations with their doctor and hopefully just better health outcomes. And so appreciate the work that you're doing, and thank you for stopping by again, Harith.
Thanks, Dave.
Harith Rajagopalan, one of my favorite people to have on this channel and talk about the future treatment of obesity. One of the things that always stands out to me when I talk to Harith is this idea of, they're working on procedures that may have the potential to get people off the pen. I think one of the times he came on, he goes, my goal is that someday you'd have to change your whole podcast name to Off the Pen, which I love the idea of. I love the idea of getting the root cause of medicine, and that seems to be what Fractal is working on, which gets me very excited. But the one thing that I do always try to remind Harith of is, listen, when I talk to the 160,000 plus people that are in the On the Pin community across platforms, the reality of people losing access to their GLP-1 is terrifying, right? But what if they're onto something here at Fractal? And I think they are, and we'll continue to follow it closely. Now, if you are somebody who has looked at the stark reality of losing access to your medication because your insurance has cut you off, I hope that you will check out our sponsors, Claimable. Getclaimable.com/OTP. What it is it's a platform that for a very small fee helps you to build a legal case and a medical case and send that off to all the interested parties and fight and win your appeals when you're denied the medication that you deserve from your doctor because of insurance. Claimable is fighting back. Last update, I heard over 50% of people who fight their GLP-1 claims with insurance win with Claimable. And you can get 10% off using code OTP10. It's a very minimal fee when you talk about the cost of these medications. It's like $40, even cheaper with our code. And you have a 50% shot at beating your insurance denial. Listen, they are counting on you not fighting. 90% of insurance denials are never fought. Not anymore. And Claimable is helping to do that and helping patients being successful. Curious to hear from you in the comments if you use them. Has it been successful for you? Because I'm hearing every day from patients who are using Claimable and keeping access to their GLP-1. And as we await whatever Fractal may ultimately get approved by the FDA, as we await from our cold dead hands, will you prior medication? And Claimable makes that their mission to partner with you in that fight. So check them out and thank them everywhere you see them on social media for being a sponsor of the On the Pen podcast, because they are a valued and trusted sponsor. That's what we got for you this week. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please, the comments, the thumbs up, the likes, the subscribes, the reviews on the podcast, the 5 stars, all of it helps. All of it helps. Consider it your little form of advocacy and giving back today. Please do all the things. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this interview and what questions you have, because I'm sure we'll have Harith back. The GLP-1 GIP gene therapy is very intriguing, and I'm super excited at getting some preclinical data. Maybe even, I don't know, obesity week. Is that what he was hinting at as I was listening back? I was like, is he talking about obesity week here in a couple of weeks? Because we will be there, and we will, of course, be covering it. They presented last week some of the Revita program, the preclinical data there. Perhaps we get Revita 002 data there. I'll be listening very closely to whatever Fractal presents there. Thank you, folks, for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do here at On the Pen. Remember, our Thursday night show is back, 7 o'clock Central Time on Thursday nights. We bring you an interview, we bring you news, and we just have fun as a community. Consider joining there. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being the best part of what we do. We will catch you on the next one.